What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Football Forecast, episode number 15. Today is October 29th, 2019, on a beautiful Tuesday. That's the other podcast on YouTube replaying my voice. Tuesday night, 7 p.m. You know how we do it. Always, coming on Tuesday with the new Football Forecast episode. And, if you tuning in last Tuesday, we talked about the college football matchups we were going to have this week. We had some pretty good ones. I didn't watch a lot of them this week. I didn't watch any NFL this week really at all. But I did recap on a lot of things that I missed and a lot of big stories. And there's a lot of big stuff coming out of the NCAA and the NFL this week to talk about. Mostly college football, I would say, is what we're looking at. But there's still some stories everywhere in football at this moment that we can go ahead and dive into. Biggest thing, breaking news. I guess earlier it was breaking news. The NCAA has basically ruled that they're going to start letting players profit off of their likeness. They're going to basically make a method for players to profit off of their name, their image, things like that. In general, their likeness. So this is something people have been asking for a long time. It seems like we've talked about this a lot on the Football Forecast and our past podcast, and overall, we've just talked about it a lot, and the things that can come from it, the people that have talked about it. It's a widely talked about issue, a huge thing. I think the bigger general question is, should athletes be paid? Should student athletes be paid? And this is kind of a follow-up to that. It doesn't answer the whole question, but it does kind of answer half of the question and gives us a lead into, that debate. And now, we're looking at the reality of it. Now, it's going to be names, images, and likeness. They're going to profit off of it. And that's what these states want. That's what these legislators have been asking for. And it looks like they're finally going to get it. It doesn't change the whole narrative that the NCAA doesn't want to pay players, because it's not like they're getting a paycheck. They're just getting paid for their likeness. And things like that would, be considered being paid from the new NCAA video game, which, everybody's looking forward to. EA Sports now has a way to make a new NCAA football or basketball if they continue doing those. But, everybody's waiting for that NCAA football. Now they have a way to do it. Now they have a lane to make that game. So there's something they could profit their likeness off of. Jersey sales, things like that. Personally, it's the best way we can talk about paying these players. It's the best way, because you're not giving them a paycheck. You're letting them profit off of how much of an impact they give the college football community. You have guys like Jonathan Taylor who go off, and obviously Wisconsin is not a very dominant football program like they were. If there are paychecks, Wisconsin's not going to be able to pay every player a superstar salary. But if Jonathan Taylor's jersey is being bought by so many fans, and he's being played as on NCAA football, and he's being endorsed, he's going to make a lot of money compared to these other people that aren't making a bigger impact. So I think that's the best way you can do it. But I don't know, a lot of people have different opinions on it. What do you think? What do you think about the whole thing?
Well, it's not as cut and dry as some people try to make it seem. It's good that they're looking at doing this. It's good that the NCAA has seriously addressed the issue, and is going to allow athletes to be compensated for use of their name, image, and likeness. But there's one term that they throw in there that you have to look at and you have to think about for a second. It says the NCAA will allow athletes to be compensated for use of their name, image, and likeness, provided that it meets the standards of the collegiate model. And as we all know, the collegiate model does not allow for players to be paid or to earn any compensation off things such as their name, image, and likeness, as long as they are an amateur athlete. The NCAA is saying that they're going to allow these kids to be compensated, but at the same time, there are still rules and wording in place that is still going to prevent that. So there's still a lot of work to be done on this.
But I think now it kind of just symbolizes the fact that the NCAA is finally being pushed to the point where they have to work on it. I think before they just weren't even going to acknowledge it.
Yeah, there's been a big public push to get them to agree to do this. I think a lot of people thought that they were going to be in for one of these situations where it was going to include years of lawsuits and hearings and to get to a point where something was finally passed, for them to just come out and say that they're going to allow it to happen probably bypasses a lot of that and probably saves them a lot of time and angst and money in the process in trying to fight it. But it still doesn't fully clear the way for this to happen. There's still work to be done. So I think there's a lot more to this story to be seen before we can say that this is that this has been totally resolved.
I agree. I think, like I said, it just kind of signifies that they're working on it now, or signifies that they actually want to push to do something about it. And it shows that these state legislators are they're literally pushing the boundaries, and they're actually having a easier time now than in the past, kind of bending the NCAA to what people are asking for. And also, 1 second, provided that I can get this mic fixed right now. It's kind of full.
Basically they're just saying they're open now to the conversation of allowing this to happen. So yeah. So we'll have to see where it goes from here. But yeah, very surprising news from the NCAA. But still, again, this is not the end of it. This is just going to be kind of the beginning of the process, not an end by any means, because there's still a lot will have to happen, a lot will have to be done. There'll be a lot of work, and a lot will have to be discussed before they really kind of get to the end of the process and come up with a final resolution on how all this is going to be done. But at least the NCAA has opened itself to the conversation, and they're willing to allow for some type of rule or something to be put in place that is going to allow this eventually to happen.
And I'll get right back into this in 1 second, but give us 1 second, guys. I got to fix our mic. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties here. 1 second. All right, and we are back, everybody. Sorry about that. Apologies. Had to fix the mic. It was coming off the mic arm, actually. It was just dangling. So yeah. So we covered that. NCAA paying these players. Just to recap, it's something that players have been asking for a long time, something that the media has been asking for, been touching on, something that we've talked about for a long time, and I'm happy now that it's open to organization, and it's open to work, and to be hammered out by those people, in charge up there at the NCAA, and also the state legislatures, pushing, making work to get this, an actual movement. It's working. It's worked, and now it's just the process needs to be moved forward, and it has been initiated. Now we just have to wait for the process. So. Very excited, mainly for EA Sports to make NCAA football again. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing for us fans is that game, and just seeing that game be made again. Man, I put so much money on that game if it came out today. But EA Sports is rumored to be making that game again. NCAA football is rumored to be coming out again, but the agreement actually wouldn't take place until 2022. Which means a college football game cannot be realistically expected until 2023, the summer of 2023. So if you're gonna wait for NCAA football again, you got a long time ahead of you. You got a long time. I'll be almost out of college when that happens. So that's a long ways away. But I'm excited.
Yeah, well, trust me, the minute that the final legislation is pushed through and everything is signed and sealed, and they have the rules in place, believe me, probably within minutes, if not hours.
There'll be an announcement.
No, there won't be an announcement. There'll be a game. Trust me. As they're ironing all this out, EA Sports or whoever else wants to play a college football game, they'll already be in the process of putting a game together, and they'll probably a lot closer to have a finished product than from where they started. Whenever the final resolution is in place, trust me, when this is said and done, it will not take them very long at all to have a game on the market, and they know that's going to be a huge money maker for them. So they'll be making preparations in the meantime.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, for EA Sports, if you're going to make this, agreement, you want to get it out as soon as legally possible, which seems like 2022. So if they can get it done before the 2022 season, if it happens after the 2021 season and they get it in before the 2022, you can expect a college football game in 2022. I mean, really, realistically, all they'd have to do is change the uniforms and the logos, and then they can make a new Madden if it didn't happen or if they need to do something else. But, yeah, very excited. I know everybody here watching, obviously, if you're watching a football show, you're very excited for that if you're any kind of football fan, because it's literally one of the greatest, peaks in our football history. Being a fan of football is that game. As a kid playing that game for me, and adults playing that game in their young adulthood, it's great to be able to make a dynasty on that game and replicate your favorite team and have a success that maybe your team doesn't have, or just play college football when there's no college football on a Saturday. So it's awesome. We all love that game. So very excited to see what the NCAA or any of these game companies can do with that. But especially the athletes, man. I'm just excited to see these athletes get their share, or however NCAA is going to do it. However that method comes out, the process and the whole framework of what they get. I hope it's something that they deserve. It's a great thing. It's a great thing that this is finally in the works and we can finally talk about it. We'll finally get updates and we'll know about it. This is revolutionary. I mean, this is all anybody's going to talk about all week on sports shows and things like that. So be prepared to hear a lot of it. It's big news. So yeah. All right. So moving on from that, talked about that for a little bit. We can go ahead and go into a couple things just of what we saw this weekend in football. I guess college football first. So did you see anything noteworthy or anything like that this weekend?
Anything noteworthy?
I think the biggest thing that everybody, this week was an upset week, right? So that's the biggest thing everybody kind of saw. If we're gonna talk about upset week, we might wanna lead it with what, the Oklahoma upset.
Yeah, obviously that was the big upset of the weekend. Of course, it follows up a big upset from the previous weekend, which was South Carolina beating Georgia. So now we got another one here where Kansas State has beaten Oklahoma. And it's just a game where I don't think Oklahoma really played badly. Just Kansas State just played better. This is a team that seems to be getting better as the season goes along. They're playing at home. They were hyped up. Their quarterback played really well, and they just played a better game than Oklahoma did. Final score really doesn't indicate. Well, I should say the final score really makes the game look closer than it really was, because at one point in the fourth quarter, Kansas State had a 48-23 lead in this game. Oklahoma had 3 scores here late to make it closer than what it really should have been. But, the thing to take away from this, though, is there is a good chance that loss, even if Oklahoma wins out, even if they win the Big 12 championship, there's a good chance that loss will knock them out of the college football playoff. If you look at what's happening around the country and the other conferences, um, there's a big belief that Oklahoma now is going to be on the outside looking in. Not that they don't have a chance to still make the playoff. There's still a chance, but it's basically going to be dependent on some other teams that are perceived to be ahead of them having to lose. So,
Yeah, I think they're not one of these teams that are really in control right now. They have to bet on a lot of things to try to make their mark and get in. But after a performance like that, it's really hard to make an argument to get in. I know losses happen, obviously. This is one of the reasons why we should have an 8-team playoff. But with a loss like this, especially when it comes down to that call, it's just hard to put this team into the college football playoff anymore. Just because all the teams that you have to put in. You have to put Ohio State in. You have to put Clemson in. And whoever wins Alabama, LSU, you have to put them in. And then everybody else, I mean, who do you have competing from the outside? You have Florida, which, I mean, with Oklahoma, I mean, I would put Florida in over Oklahoma right now if I had Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama in, or LSU. I would put Florida in over Oklahoma from what I've seen from them. Oklahoma has struggled against many different teams. The only reason I would put Oklahoma in is for their offense, but their defense lost a game to the Kansas State Wildcats, who are 5-2 and 2-2 in their own conference. So Oklahoma just kind of lost their shot. In my opinion, they kind of missed. Jalen Hurts is a great quarterback. It's a shame he couldn't get in this year or might not be able to get in this year. As much as I love Oklahoma this year, I mean, they're just on fire. They were on fire. And they're just a very fun team to watch, but their defense could not get it done. I think Kansas State, like you said, just played a little bit better, so I'm not sure. Can't really contribute it just to being a bad defense. But I do think Kansas State's offense was able to kind of rip them up a little bit and hit some gaps that they maybe didn't see in the seam a lot. And they were able to break some big runs, too. I mean, their star rusher with just 13 carries broke 105 yards, broke the 100-yard mark with one touchdown. And, their quarterback was able to do some decent things, had probably one of his best games with 18 out of 28 for 213 yards. So, offensively, they did everything right. They played a slower kind of methodical game. 7.6 yards per pass. I think they just kind of kept them out there on the field longer, broke them down a little bit, hit some things they didn't expect, and played strategic, methodical football, and Oklahoma was able to slip to that and make it a game where there was a call at the end that could have won the game for either side. So, yeah, it is very unfortunate for Oklahoma.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, Kansas State controlled the clock. They had the ball for 38 minutes. Of course, that keeps the ball in Oklahoma's offense's hands. Oklahoma also had 2 turnovers. Kansas State didn't have any. That's also something big to look at there. Well, yeah, I mean, overall, Kansas State just
played a better
game, and they, when they had the ball, they did something with it. It's not just having, it's not just time of possession, but when they had the ball, they were actually moving it. They were moving it and making first downs. It wasn't a big play, quick strike kind of offense that Oklahoma had. Oklahoma had some big plays, obviously, in the game. Kansas State, they just basically had a game plan. I mean, if you looked at it and before the game started and said, okay, well, what is Kansas State's recipe for winning? It's basically what they did.
Yeah.
It's basically controlling the clock, making first downs, keeping their Oklahoma's offense off the field, and not wasting any opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. They just played a methodical game, and they saw something. The best thing that I've heard this week about their performance is that they saw something that Oklahoma didn't when they were playing offense. So I think that's just the biggest thing. They were able to exploit Oklahoma's defense a little bit and play better, and this is probably their best game. I don't know much about Kansas State and watch their other games, but I would assume this is probably one of their best, games, just stat-wise for everybody. I think everybody was probably on their mark, which got them this far to this big upset. Because Oklahoma's not a bad team by any standards. They are a great football team, one of the best, obviously. So, that has to get them somewhere. Moving on from that, that stunning upset, we have the main game everybody was talking about this week, or the game that everybody wanted to see, was obviously Auburn and LSU, and that kind of came out like everybody, kind of saw, everybody kind of expected. LSU defeated Auburn 23-20. And so this was a game where everybody was excited for it. Everybody knew exactly what they were going to be watching. They were going to watch LSU go against one of the best defenses they faced. And Auburn gave them a harder time than Florida did. Auburn was able to complete 15 out of 36 of their passes, 4.4 yards a pass, one interception thrown. Bo Nix did pretty decent, 15 out of 35, 157 yards, one touchdown, one pick. Joe Burrow just did better. He just played like Joe Burrow, and against the Auburn offense or defense, he threw for 32 out of 42 for 321 yards, one touchdown, one pick. So they were able to pick each other off on the rushing game. It looks like LSU kind of got the better of them, kind of got a more methodical game, able to keep more time of possession, had 33 minutes of possession. I think LSU, they both had really the same amount of turnovers. Auburn had one less. But when you have an offense like LSU, it doesn't really matter. I think that game was kind of like everybody expected it. I didn't think it would be that close, to be honest. I thought LSU might put a couple more touchdowns on them like they did with Florida. Or I just thought Auburn was going to win altogether. But I didn't think it would be this close. So what it shows to me is they're kind of even teams, and I don't think LSU was as good as I thought after this game.
I think, obviously the final score was closer than what I expected also. I thought LSU would win maybe by around a 9-10 point margin. I never thought that LSU would blow them out. I thought it would be a 4-quarter game, and it was. But if you look at the stats, I mean, LSU clearly outplayed Auburn. LSU had over 500 yards offense. Auburn had less than 300. They were efficient throwing the ball, efficient running it. Mostly the LSU mainly stopped themselves. I mean, everybody wants to credit Auburn for having a really good defense, and they do.
I mean, LSU gave up 12
one of the
penalties.
very best, if not the best defense in the country, maybe. But against that defense, LSU had over 500 yards. And they had 321 yards passing. Burrow did very well. But LSU basically stopped themselves. They had 12 penalties for 118 yards. They also had 2 turnovers. And they controlled time of possession. They probably should have done better as far as putting points on the board. You can credit Auburn's defense. I mean, Auburn's defense didn't play bad, but the fact that LSU got that many yards against them, I think, shows how good their offense is. And the LSU defense is coming on. They've had some problems with injuries earlier in the season. They're getting some of their guys back. Defensively, they held Auburn to 300 yards. And Auburn's not a great offensive team, and nobody has accused them of being that. Of course, Auburn didn't even help themselves. Number one, they had 15 penalties for 98 yards, which is a ton of penalties. You'll rarely see a game where one team has that many. And then also, too, Auburn, it's clear that when Auburn plays a team that has a good defense, they really struggle throwing the football, and that was the case here. Bo Nix completing just 15 out of 36 passes, 157 yards. He had a pick. Again, when you watch him play, there's still a lot of inconsistency. Missing receivers, overthrowing receivers. That was also a problem for them when they played Florida. And until he, there'll be a point in time where he'll get better, and he has gotten better as the season has gone along. But it's clear that right now, when Auburn goes on the road, plays a good team that has a good defense, they're going to struggle. You know, and they're not going to be more successful on offense unless they improve their running game, because they're. I think if Auburn is able to run the ball well, I think Bo Nix is good enough where they can have a passing game that's good enough to complement the rushing game. But when you only run for 130 yards, playing against the offense of LSU's ability, you're not going to be able to go out there and put up 300 yards offense and 20 points and expect to win. So
I think my biggest takeaway from this game is, I've kind of been calculating LSU and looking up to that LSU and Bama game, but I've kind of been trying to get any edge over either team to see who might have a better advantage in that game. What I saw from this game is something that I may put in Alabama's favor for that matchup. On third down, LSU went 9 for 19, so out of 19 third downs, they converted only 9. Alabama's defense is not that great in a third down possession against any team they faced, and neither is LSU in converting those third downs, especially against a good defense. So 9 out of 19 against Auburn. I wonder what that's going to be against Alabama. If they can slow them down a little bit like they did here, which is exactly what Auburn did. They slowed them down just a little bit. They just couldn't overtake them in the offense when they got the shot. If Alabama can do that same exact thing or more, or even close to that same thing, we know even Tua at 80% health can outscore that. They can outscore 23 if they can do the same exact thing on defense. So that's the question. They're going to have to play a lot of nickel because a lot of people have been complaining about Shane Lee's inability to cover running backs in the empty. And LSU does that a lot, motion out guys to the empty, play a lot of running back routes. Shane Lee, being a bigger linebacker for Alabama, is not going to be able to cover these guys, and he's going to be chasing guys down, especially on third down. So expect Nick Saban to put in the nickel package on third down, because that's going to be the biggest way to beat LSU. That's going to be a key point for Alabama to beat LSU, is to play nickel defense on third down. Every single third down has to be some sort of nickel defense with every blazing fast player on that field. So that's a big takeaway for me. I think that's the biggest way Alabama can beat LSU.
Yeah, as far as some keys to look forward to that game. When it comes to Alabama's defense versus LSU's offense, two of the biggest things that are going to be keys for that game is third down efficiency is going to be number one, because that's an area the LSU has done pretty well in this season, and that Alabama's defense has struggled in at times. And I suspect that you'll probably see at least 5 defensive backs in probably for the majority of that game, unless you get into some short yardage situations. And I think probably the goal here is probably to get the LSU offense in the second, third, and long situations, and probably try to force them to throw the ball short, which means tackling is going to be at a premium as far as importance in this game. Alabama will have to be able to tackle extremely well. They're not going to be able to afford any missed tackles. And that, because they're not going to be able to blitz and get a lot of pressure on Burrow. He gets to bear the ball quick. He doesn't hold it. So I think, not that you can't just let them sit back there and throw the ball with no pressure, because they'll pick you apart. You still have to put a rush on them, but I don't think you'll see a huge amount of blitzing. I think what you'll mostly see is have them drop as many guys in coverage as they can, try to force short throws and tackle. If they can do that, I think they'll have a reasonable amount of success. But the third down efficiency and tackling is probably going to be the two biggest keys for that defense in trying to slow LSU's offense down.
I mean, Saban said with Jennings on the field, there's a lot of pass rush on any team they face. I would expect the same thing here, especially on the edge. I mean, there's going to be a lot of pass rush on the edge, regardless of LSU's tackles. There's going to be a good amount of pass rush. So he's going to have to be Joe Burrow's going to have to be able to make these quick reads. And the way for Alabama to beat them, like I said, is just like you said too, is just play that nickel, play those as many DBs as you can, drop as many of those guys in coverage as you can, but you have to allow your base pass rushers to just get in there as much as possible. And if you find along the game that that's not working, if your base guys can't get in there, you might have to throw something out there. You might have to throw a bone and try to go.
But they're going to have to get third down stop because you look at this game here. I mean, LSU's offense ran 88 plays against Auburn's defense. If LSU runs 88 plays against Alabama's defense, LSU is going to win the game. So,
but yeah, they have to get stops, have to get turnovers. It's been an Alabama team this year that hasn't been able to get a lot of turnovers on the ground, but the DBs at Alabama this year, my personal opinion, have never been better. I think this is the best Alabama secondary we have ever seen, and I would be very surprised to not see them pick off Joe Burrow at least one time. I think Joe Burrow might be picked off at least once. He likes to throw it in the tight coverage. He can throw it in the tight coverage. That's the thing about Joe Burrow. He's one of the better quarterbacks here because he can read a field and he can throw it over his shoulder. He can throw it in tight coverage. He hasn't played a secondary like Alabama's. He's played Florida, which has a really good front seven. They have pretty good DBs, but in my opinion, Alabama's are the best in the country. I think these DBs pick off Joe Burrow at least one time. They get the turnover they need. If the pass rush can stop a fumble, or if they can cause a fumble and stop Joe Burrow on those third downs, they can get this upset, or not this upset. Well, I guess now it will be an upset because now Alabama's number 2.
Yeah, but if you look at some of the earlier sportsbook lines, they're starting to come in.
Over.
They're by and large the ones I've seen so far. Even if Tua doesn't play, they still have Alabama being home favorite in this game. One betting line I've seen already posted. I think it's by site sportsbetting.ag. They've come out and have put Alabama in as an 8-point favorite at this point. And of course, that's without knowing if Tua is going to actually play or not. They believe that if Tua does play, that line could inch up a couple of points. If they found that Tua's not going to play, it could fall a couple of points. But right now, that particular sportsbook has Alabama installed as an 8-point favorite.
I understand that, and it's because the gap between Tua and Mac Jones is just shorter now after what he did to Arkansas. And I know it's Arkansas, but for any quarterback to do that, and one person does not beat a team by themselves, obviously, but for any quarterback to do that, especially one quarterback that backs up the greatest in the country, for anybody to do that, Mac Jones went 18 for 22 for 235 yards and 3 touchdowns against a team in his first start. So I know it was at home. I know it's Arkansas, homecoming game, great atmosphere, whatever. If he has to start, we talked about this last week, he's playing a day game against LSU in our home crowd, or Tuscaloosa's home crowd. I think Mac Jones is able to put up as many points as anybody expects because they would take it to the run game. So I don't put that big of a gap between Mac Jones and Tua anymore, just because of LSU's defense, because they're going to have to run the ball anyway. The passes that Tua is going to make are the same ones that they would force Mac Jones to make. It's going to be wide open passes, not going to force anything. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely do that, especially because now when Tua plays, he's getting to this point where he doesn't want to throw away. He doesn't want to take a sack. He doesn't want to run out of bounds. He wants to make a play. Got him into trouble twice. Tennessee got him in trouble first when he was in the red zone through a pick. Got him in trouble the second time when he got that injury, got sacked, got the injury, tried to spin around, do too much, got sacked. So I put that gap shorter, and I think Alabama can come out with this win. If they do all of those things. But LSU's a phenomenal team, one of the best in the country. I mean, maybe the best in the country. These guys are supremely good. I think Joe Burrow's a really good quarterback. I think he's probably number 2 in the country behind Tua. I mean, this guy can do it all. He's got receivers that can do it all. Jamar Chase, obviously a big guy, or big speedy guy. I mean, you know, speed is a big thing. So separation as well. So them being able to connect and get that separation in the middle of the field and the outside and on different routes like that is what's going to propel them to win these big games. And we'll see if they can do it against Alabama. So I guess another thing, the main thing, or one thing to mention on this too is I don't know if you saw what Gus Malzahn said, but after the game when he was asked about the game, he was asked if the crowd affected him at all. Obviously playing in Baton Rouge, he was asked if the crowd affected Bo Nix at all or their offense at all, and he said no, it was louder at the Swamp actually. So I don't know what that tells you about Gus Malzahn, but kind of tells me he's acting like a sore loser again. He's saying that the crowd had no effect on Bo Nix, but Bo Nix was 15 out of 35 for 157 yards and a pick. So it sounded like it did have a little bit of a effect on Bo Nix, but
yeah, obviously.
Yeah, but Gus Malzahn said it did not. He said the Swamp was louder, and the Swamp had more.
Well, honestly, I mean, whenever you ask us a question about anything, you're not going to get a straight answer, and if you do, it's always going to be something positive. He's one of these guys that's always going to try to spin something positively if he possibly can, and he knows, and everybody that watched that game knows that the quarterback play on Auburn's team is not where it needs to be, and particularly when you're playing a good football team like LSU, you got to have a more efficient performance from your quarterback. And Gus knows that it's not where it needs to be. And he's not going to come out and say, well, Bo didn't play well. This was a reason, that was a reason. And he's not getting all that. He's just going to try to sweep past the question as easily as he can. And, he's not going to admit to anything. He's just going to try to stay positive and move on to the next question. He's so even he believes all that stuff to be true in regards to the crowd getting to Bo Nix and other problems that noise caused. He's not going to get into any of that, even if he knows that is a factor.
Yeah, he never will. That's just the way he is, and we all know the truth. It had to be louder than the Swamp. I mean, if they were able to get that win in the Swamp, then or they were able to lose in the Swamp, then I mean you saw it here in Baton Rouge. It was able to affect them again here, but maybe a little bit worse this time. So yeah, going into the matchups for next week, or I guess the matchup of next week, because nobody is playing football. Georgia versus Florida in Jacksonville. So this year, this game isn't as big as it used to be, or maybe it is. It's kind of weird because now you have a Georgia team that is not a threat to anyone at all, with this upset that they had, or that was made against them. South Carolina was able to beat Georgia 20-17. So what are we seeing here during this Georgia versus Florida game? Who do you have?
I don't know. I'm really kind of undecided on it. I think overall the two teams are pretty evenly matched. It's a top 10 matchup. And this is a big game from the standpoint that whoever wins this game, number one, they're going to be all by themselves in first place in the SEC East. They're also still going to be firmly in the discussion for the college football playoff as well, because both these teams currently have just one loss. So there's a lot right on the line for both these teams. I don't know. I mean, you look at Georgia. If you want to compare the two teams, Georgia obviously has an advantage from the quarterback position. I know Jake Fromm hasn't played as well the last few games. Certainly not as well as people would expect him to. But he's a guy overall, though, is a really good quarterback, one of the best around. Generally makes pretty good decisions, doesn't put his team in a bad position, doesn't turn the ball over much. He had that one bad game against South Carolina, but other than that, he generally makes good decisions on the field. We know Georgia's got a strong running game. The passing game is not where it needs to be. I think the inexperience in the receiving core is beginning to show itself up, particularly when Georgia plays against against good defensive teams, which Florida certainly is. So I think it's going to be imperative that Georgia be able to run the ball well, because if they get with the not running the ball well, they get into a lot of second and third and long situations. That's probably going to play right into the Florida defense's hands, and especially when you got an inexperienced group of receivers that seems to struggle against good defensive backs at times.
They don't get enough separation. That's one thing I would say as well.
Yeah, and then Florida, Kyle Trask has done pretty well. Florida, their running game is kind of off and on. Their offensive line play is a bit of a question at times. They struggle to consistently run the ball well, but they do have some good receivers. They have a couple good playmakers. Kadarius Toney, who is their best playmaker receiver, who's been out for several weeks, is expected to be back and ready to play in this game. So that's a big advantage for Florida to have him. I know Georgia has had the uphand in this game for the last few years. It's kind of hard to get a feel for. I think overall, the two teams are pretty evenly matched. But and then you have to throw in the coaching ability of Dan Mullen. His first year at Florida, he knows the rivalry, obviously from being the offense coordinator when he was at Florida before, so he knows the rivalry. And I don't think anybody can say that he hasn't done a really good coaching job. I've just got a feeling that he's really going to have Florida ready to play. I think it'll end up being a fairly close game, but I think Florida will win it.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think it's going to be very, very close. I think Florida's going to win it off of their defense. I think Jake Fromm, he's like you said, he doesn't turn the ball over much except for that one bad game against South Carolina, but I think Florida's going to do the same thing here. They're going to make him play that ball against their DBs, and they're going to make him turn it over a little bit. They're going to do that by, like you said, getting pressure on him, putting them in situations where they don't want to be in. And like I said, these receivers are having a hard time getting any kind of separation at all from these DBs. So I think it's going to be a game for Florida to kind of pick these guys off and kind of show, midseason form, kind of show how good this defense is. So it makes sense that Florida wins this game to me. I think Florida definitely wins this game. I think Georgia has a harder time running this ball. I think if Georgia comes out with the win, it's because they do run the ball. I just don't see them being able to. I think Florida's going to play enough of that defense down low in situations where they need to, and they're going to play up high when they need to. I think they're going to take that into account, and the fact that Jake Fromm has been making some bad reads lately, going to take that into account. And Kyle Trask is playing really good football. I mean, he's playing like any other QB in the SEC right now. Against South Carolina, he was 21 out of 33 with 200 yards. He had 4 touchdowns. He had 1 pick. So you can put that on the wide receivers. He did miss 12 of his passes. He only had 200 yards, but to complete 21, I mean, they had a 1 out of 1 fourth down efficiency, converted a fourth down. They had 5 out of 14 third downs. It's not that good, but I mean, overall, when you have 6.1 yards per pass, you only throw 1 pick. That's good enough to beat Georgia if your defense can play pretty well. I think they can exploit Georgia's defense because it's not as good as we've seen in the past. I think we saw against South Carolina. It's just not as good as we've seen. And I think Florida, usually in Jacksonville, Florida can get this crowd moving a lot. So I think Florida can kind of make this game theirs. They just have to play that way against Fromm, and I think the offense will translate. I think the offense will take what the defense gives them, translate it, and I think they just take advantage of what Georgia lays out. It just makes sense to me. I think Dan Mullen is prepared. I think they ride this wave of hype and this control your own destiny thing. I really think they do, and I really think they beat Georgia here in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I do too. I really got a feeling that I think Mullen's going to be well prepared. I think he's going to have a good offensive game plan for Georgia's defense.
I think it's going to look like LSU, but just more fleshed out.
Yeah, and I think defensively, I think Florida is probably going to be stacking the box. They're going to try to force Georgia into a passing game, and I think Georgia's passing game obviously has been exposed here over the last few weeks. I think they're going to try to force them to second and third and long situation and try to force them to throw the football. Florida has an excellent secondary, and that will be a chance for them if they can get Georgia into situations to really make some plays from the DBs and maybe force at least a couple of turnovers.
Yep, and that's I mean that all goes with the territory. You're playing a game like this. Two pretty good defenses. Florida's just better. They were able to do a lot to these teams this year, and even Auburn, they were able to take a freshman QB like Bo Nix and kind of exploit him a little bit. They can do it. They can beat Georgia. I think definitely they will. ESPN's Football Power Index has it. Their matchup predictor has Georgia with a 60.9% chance of the win. Florida with the 39.1. I don't know. I think it's a lot higher for Florida in my opinion. I just think they get the win. I think their game plan looks like how they played against LSU, just more fleshed out. They don't really have an injury problem right now. I think they take a lot of things into account right here. I'm excited to see what Florida lays out. That's a good team. That's a good narrative. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be a good game. I'm looking forward to it also.
This Saturday is going to be wild, that's for sure. All right, so yeah, moving on from that, let's go into some NFL stuff here for a second. So from the NFL this week, there really wasn't a lot of great games, but what we did see, the trade deadline was today. So we saw some things today. This was one of the worst trade deadlines in the past couple years, or the past like 10 years. So I will say that first. Biggest thing we saw. There was one trade. There was one trade made. It was the Rams sending injured CB Aqib Talib and a 5th-round pick to the Dolphins for a lesser pick down the road, is what ESPN reports. So a lot happened in the past couple weeks, past couple months, but just on trade deadline, there's usually a lot of trades happening right now. It really surprised me that there wasn't. I think Kenyon Drake was a big one for me. I really can't believe the Dolphins sent him to the Cardinals for that low of a pick. Kenyon Drake's career has probably come and gone with the Cardinals, as sad as it is to say. But the Cardinals are going to ruin Kenyon Drake. They ruin running backs for a living. That's what they do. They ruin players. They're doing it to Kyler Murray. They're going to do it to all of their running backs. They really tried to do it with AD or AP, I guess. And I don't know. It's been a kind of a back and forth thing in this trade deadline. The biggest thing for me is just Kenyon Drake going to the Cardinals is just how much of a waste of trade that was. Especially for Kenyon Drake, because he wants to go to a winner. He's a good running back. He could obviously go to a winner. I thought he would go to the Lions. I guess the Lions just didn't make a good enough trade for him. But yeah, the Rams made a pretty good trade today. Got something for them. Later on, the Dolphins obviously just trying to tank and get what they need for value.
Yeah, so. Obviously the Dolphins at this point, they're just trying to accumulate as many picks as possible. Aqib Talib, they honestly don't care if he comes back from injury or if he plays at all. This is just a deal where the Rams are trying to get rid of a player that they anticipate probably not being with them next year. It's a way for them to dump salary, and at this point it was more important to them obviously to try to free up some cap space and dump salary, and willing to give up a draft pick in order to do that. And the Dolphins, all they care about right now is trying to accumulate draft picks. They've already got a bunch, and it looks like they're still trying to accumulate picks. So everybody knows what's happening there.
I'm just wondering. They have so many picks. How much cap are they going to have left over? Because if you realistically you get Tua, how much do you have to pay Tua, like his rookie year? Well,
they have the salary cap, the rookie salary cap's in place now. So it's kind of set. How much number 1 pick will make, number 2 pick, number 3 pick, and so forth. And of course, a lot of the money that that these guys make are towards the back end of their rookie contracts. Most of the money they make on the front end is basically from the signing bonus, whatever signing bonus they end up getting. But I mean, if the Dolphins can, and so far they have, they gotten rid of a lot of their higher priced players. They're just freeing up. They're freeing up cap space.
They should have opportunities to make new contracts.
I mean, they should have plenty of cap space to sign whoever it is they want to sign. I wouldn't look for them to do a whole lot in free agency, and honestly, I don't know many guys who are free agents who are going to want to go to play for a team.
Yeah, free
agency. They know it's in total rebuilding mode, and it's probably a few years away from being a serious contender. But
makes sense.
So anybody they do sign is probably going to be a backup or just a spot player. They might reserve maybe for a year or something while they develop some of the young guys they're going to end up getting.
Free agency seems to me like a more active kind of thing. You need somebody that needs to play now, or you need immediate depth. That's kind of what it seems to me based on what we're going to see. But yeah, if they really do get Tua, if they have another first round pick and try to get somebody like Derek Brown, Grant Delpit, Jerry Jeudy, somebody like that, I mean, they try to get one of those guys. I mean, they could pay all of these guys now with the cap that they're freeing up and the amount of contract opportunity they have. It looks to me like they want definitely probably Tua or one of those quarterbacks in the first round, but to me it looks like they're really trying to hit the late diamonds in the rough. They have a lot of these 5th round, 4th round, they have a couple 3rd rounds, but look at me, they want to hit these diamond in the rough players, but that adds up.
And also too, if you look at some of the NFL teams over the years, the ones who had dynasties or teams that won multiple Super Bowls or were really good for a number of years, that's really a lot of how these different franchises built those so-called dynasties is accumulating and drafting, making good choices on a lot of 3rd, 4th, 5th round pick kind of guys. You look at the Patriots. The Patriots are not a team that's full of star-studded players, not a lot of former first-round, second-round players. You see a lot of guys on that team, even like Tom Brady. Tom Brady was, a 4th, 5th-round pick. 6th round, he was a mid to late-round pick the year that they got him, and a lot of the other players you see on that roster that are significant contributors kind of fall in that same, in that same thing. You look at a lot of the other so-called dynasties over the years. You look at when the Cowboys were really good back in the 90s. They did well with first-round picks, but they had a lot of guys that they drafted in later rounds that ended up being big contributors. The 49ers teams of the 80s were also built that way. The Redskins, that same period, the same thing. The Redskins went years and years and years without ever having a first-round pick because the general manager was always trading the picks away and getting back like 2nd, 3rd, 4th rounders in exchange to get more picks. And that's how they were able to build and sustain that team for so long. So a lot of teams do that. And really it's smart because with the salary cap in place now, you just can't afford or have the ability to accumulate that many high price or high
superstar players,
high pick players, because those guys eventually, if they pan out, they're going to command a lot of money, and you can only afford to have some of those players on your roster at one time. So that really is smart. Getting more mid-round guys, you have to be able to hit on more of those guys, a lot more guys than you miss on, as far as being able to grade them and evaluate talent. But a lot of the teams that are built and sustain success, if you look at it, that's the way a lot of these teams are built now.
Yeah, I mean, coaches like Bill Belichick, they really just take the scraps and they take what's good, what they see that works. They don't, go for these superstars like Odell or anything like that. They really take what they know works and what knows going to help them win, and not just, the kind of the paradigm of of being a superstar athlete.
Yeah.
They took Antonio Brown obviously because he's one of the best receivers to play football, but that was because they had an option to take him for cheap because nobody wanted him with this conflict going on. Obviously, it was too much. They had no prop dropping him. They did it with Michael Bennett as well. When they had Michael Bennett, they did it with Josh Gordon. They just kind of get everything available to them, and that's what dynasties do. They get everything available, and they don't outreach at all.
Yeah, they have a system. They know what they want to do on offense. They know what they want to do on defense. They know what kind of players they need at what position to be successful. So they just go out and find these guys. And even if somebody has been around for a while, even if somebody is not, a star type player, they look for intangibles, and things that are going to allow those guys to be successful within that system as a member of the Patriots. And they just plug these guys in, and that's, people ask, well, how are the Patriots, with all the turnover they've had, and players come and go, free agents come and go, how they've been able to sustain success for all these years and continually, get to and win Super Bowls and so forth, and that's how they do it. They first of all, they do a great job of evaluating talent, developing players, and then they know exactly what they want to do on both sides of the ball, and they draft or sign players that they know, or they pretty well know that's going to fit into what they want to do. So
I think that's kind of the exact same thing. It's more of like not letting players kind of run the team, but it's more like letting players join a system. And like you said, they set the system, and these players are just plugged into it. They don't let these players run the team. That's kind of something we see with a lot of teams. Saw with the Giants with like Odell. You saw it with the Steelers did it for a while with AB, but they finally fixed their problem. And I think that's a perfect thing, like you said, a system, because as soon as like AB started acting up and those accusations came, it's gone. I mean, immediately, just gone, just kicked out. They don't deal with any of that. They plug it into a system. They don't need you. They know how to win without you, but you help. You're an assistant in that system, and you work better than other pieces of the machine of the system. Yeah, I mean, they traded Michael Bennett away, too, to the Cowboys. They didn't need him anymore. They get a 7th-round pick. That can go to a 6th-round pick in 2021. So that's reported by Adam Schefter. So, yeah, like I said, they trade whatever they can get. They get whatever they can get, and they trade for, what they want and what they see as useful. But Michael Bennett for that pick, he's not as productive as he was at all. And they saw an opportunity to get somebody else, and the last time the Patriots had a bottom round pick, saw what happened. So hopefully they this is another example of why system teams just make it. This is an example of why the Falcons are having so much trouble right now, why the Raiders are actually doing better than people expected. The Dolphins may do better than people expected next year. I think a lot of these teams are kind of building up to what the Patriots have tried to do. I think they're trying to get their own spin on it. It's definitely a reason now why I would say the Falcons and the Buccaneers have kind of done pretty bad, and the Panthers too, because they've always played the classic. I'm gonna keep my picks, and I'm gonna have one star player that I pay a crap load of money to, or 2 or 3 star players, and we're not gonna be able to pay anybody else. It's happened with the Falcons. Julio Jones, Matt Ryan. You got to pay those guys a lot of money. I mean, rightfully so. These guys are 2 of the best offensive players in the NFL, but they have nobody. They cannot pay a single person on that defense, and that's like entirely the problem, because they have Keanu Neal, and that defense, when it's 100% healthy, is capable of doing a lot, capable of doing anything. But they always have these injuries. They always have these problems, and they have nobody. They have no cap to sign somebody after, to fill somebody in after. They had to get Jonathan Cyprin from the Jags, I think, or the Eagles. Jags or Eagles. Because that's who they could afford. That's not a top-tier DB, top-tier safety. They had to get somebody they could afford. And it's the same thing with the Bucs. You're having to pay these guys like Jameis Winston. Mike Evans doesn't get paid too much, but you're having to pay these guys a lot of money. There's a lot of good players around the board, and that's not the main problem with them. The main problem is that they don't make big trades. They don't make a huge deal in the front office. The Dolphins now are doing the same thing, kind of like the Raiders are doing last year.
Well,
So
it's really you're seeing more and more teams go to this type of strategy now, and trying to build a roster and build themselves into a winner. Um, because all these teams know that they have to have certain things to be successful. They know they have to have a good quarterback. You better have a couple of good receivers. Better be good along both lines, offense and defense. And you need guys that can cover those receivers. You need a good secondary. And you know, and these teams know that there's good value in getting players that can play those positions. You don't have to have a first or a second round pick guy to go out there and play well and be able to fill a need like that. And so what they're doing is these teams are trying to invest and make sure they're good where they know they have to be good, and then finding not lesser player, but you know, guys who would be picked mid to late rounds, and try to use those kind of guys to kind of fill up the roster in less important positions. So, having stars on your team, that sells a lot of merchandise and all that. But I think having just a more balanced roster and filling needs is what allows teams to win championships. Again, you look at the Patriots. Tom Brady is a star on that team. But other than that, they don't really have any stars. They just have a good collection of players. Guys that just are good players. They play the position well. They know what their role is on the team, and they feel it. And if you look at a lot of teams in the league, it's like that. You have one or two star guys on the team, and most of the rest of the roster is just filled with, just a collection of good players, and that just play well together.
yeah, I mean, like you said before, a couple of minutes ago, biggest way to explain that is just a system. That's really the I guess paradigm you want to see in all of football. It works for everybody. It works for Alabama with the process. I mean, they have a literal system called the process. The Patriots have the same thing, and not really called a name. They kind of have the same exact thing. You just have a system. It's something that works, and they just plug players right into it. Like you said, allows them to win championships. Bill Belichick can do it. It's not like Tom Brady is the ultimate reason for all of those championships. He's the biggest part of that system. So yeah, that's a big part of the NFL trade deadline and the NFL trading system. It's a game. It's all just a big, huge game of like Monopoly and things like that. I mean, you really got to play your cards right if you want to win. The Dolphins are hoping to do that. The Bengals are just going to lose without doing that. I mean, the Bengals are just going to suck without all the benefits. So, yeah.
And the Bengals, looking at the Bengals, they might be the next team to start dumping players. You got the guys on the roster like AJ Green. You got Andy Dalton, who just got benched, who's been there for a long time, like AJ Green has. And you got several other, well-known or high-profile players that team that's been around for a good long while, and that team is paying a lot of money for to produce exactly 0 wins. And even though the Bengals have a new coach, nobody expected the Bengals to be 0-8. Mm-mm. If they're going to pay all these guys this money to play that badly, then why keep them around? Why not go ahead, dump salary, save yourself some money, and try to go ahead and remake and rebuild your roster?
Yeah, because really all hope is lost for this season for them. I mean, benching Andy Dalton, like your backup's going to do much better. I mean, like I told you earlier, not on the podcast, but I'd be willing to bet right now they wish they had AJ McCarron back. They wish they didn't trade him away. That was stupid. I still think that was stupid. And they're going to regret trading AJ away for sure. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much it for tonight on the football forecast. Kind of covered most of the big stories in football. It really covers some of the little tedious scores, but yeah, most of the big things. There's a lot to talk about regarding the NCAA and college football and all that. And I think we pretty much covered all of it. Unless you got anything else you want to say, kind of end it off.
No, I
All
think
right.
I'm good.
Then I guess we're done here, guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the football forecast. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Your Football Forecast. Make sure you tune in every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We will be live next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time with the football forecast, covering all the matchups from this week, including Georgia versus Florida, the highlight matchup, and we're going to be talking a lot about that probably for the first half hour. That's going to be a big one. We're all looking forward to that. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next week.